The sky above the border world was always burning. Thick clouds of ash moved slowly across the horizon, glowing orange from fires that never went out. The planet had once been rich and green, but years of war between alien empires had turned it into a graveyard of broken cities and poisoned soil. A small military transport descended through the smoke and landed near a ruined outpost. Armed alien soldiers moved quickly, surrounding the area with practiced precision. Their armor was smooth and silver, marked with the symbol of a powerful empire. In the center of the landing zone, a single human was pushed forward. He stumbled once, then caught himself. His hands were bound, his uniform torn and stained with dried blood. He looked tired, thin, and far too quiet. His face showed no anger, no fear, just calm. Nearby, another prisoner was brought down from the transport. She stood taller than the soldiers escorting her, her posture straight, even in chains. Her skin shimmered faintly blue under the burning sky, and her eyes were sharp and proud. She was the princess of the Valari Empire, captured during a sudden retreat. Even now, defeated and surrounded, she refused to bow her head. The human and the princess were forced to their knees beside each other. The princess turned her head slightly and studied him. Humans were rare in this region of space, weak, short-lived, and often used as labor or cannon fodder. This one looked no different, injured, alone, doomed. "You won't survive," she said calmly, her voice steady despite her situation. "This world kills faster than my enemies. Humans never last long here." The human did not reply. He did not even look at her. This irritated her. She expected fear or anger, or at least a desperate question. Instead, he simply breathed slowly and watched the soldiers around them. His eyes moved from weapon to weapon, from tower to tower, measuring distance and timing as if he were memorizing a map. The princess frowned. She told herself it meant nothing. The prisoners were dragged into the outpost, a structure built from scavenged metal and alien technology. Inside, flickering lights barely pushed back the darkness. The air smelled of oil, smoke, and old blood. They were placed in a holding area, with energy barriers instead of walls. Other prisoners were already there, aliens from defeated factions, wounded soldiers, civilians caught in the wrong place. Fear filled the room like poison. The human sat down slowly, his back against the barrier. He tested his restraints once, gently, as if checking the strength of a rope. Then he relaxed. The princess remained standing. "You should save your strength," she said, not unkindly. "They will use us as leverage or examples. Either way, resistance is pointless." Still no response. She turned fully toward him now. "Do you understand me, human?" "Yes," he said quietly. His voice was rough but clear. That surprised her. "Then answer me," she said. "Why are you so calm?" He considered the question for a moment. "'Cause this place is poorly guarded." She almost laughed. Around them were dozens of armed soldiers, automated turrets, drones humming softly in the air. The empire that held them was feared across multiple systems. "Poorly guarded," she repeated. "Yes," he said. "They rely too much on machines. Machines follow rules." She stared at him. "You are injured, alone, and surrounded. Rules will not save you." He finally looked at her then. His eyes were dark, steady, and very old. "I'm not trying to be saved," he said. Before she could respond, alarms began to howl through the outpost. Red lights flashed. The floor vibrated under heavy impact. An attack. Soldiers rushed past the holding area, shouting orders in sharp, clipped tones. Screens along the walls lit up with chaotic images. Enemy ships descending, energy blasts tearing through the outer defenses. The outpost shook again, harder this time. Somewhere above them, metal screamed as something collapsed. Panic spread among the prisoners. The princess felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She had been in battles before, but captivity changed everything. She could not command, could not fight. She was powerless. She looked back at the human. He was already moving. Not standing, not rushing. Just shifting his position slightly, angling his body, watching the soldiers who remained near the holding area. He noted which ones ran toward the exits and which stayed behind. He counted shots. He listened. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Waiting," he said. Another explosion rocked the outpost. The energy barrier flickered for a split second. The human's eyes narrowed. "Now," he whispered. He surged forward with sudden speed, slamming his bound wrists into the barrier at the exact moment it flickered again. The weakened field collapsed with a sharp crackle. Before the guards could react, he lunged at the nearest soldier. Still bound, he used his weight and momentum to knock the alien off balance. They crashed to the floor together. The human rolled, twisted, and came up with the soldier's weapon in his hands. The first shot dropped another guard instantly. Chaos exploded inside the holding area. Prisoners screamed and scattered as the human moved with terrifying focus. He fired only when necessary. He took cover instinctively. He freed his hands using a fallen blade and tossed weapons to other prisoners who looked capable of using them. The princess stood frozen, watching. This was not desperation. This was control. "Princess!" one of her soldiers shouted from across the room. "Injured but alive. Stay back!" She ignored him. She watched the human disable a drone using a loose cable and a thrown piece of metal. She watched him redirect a turret by physically turning its base while it recalibrated, causing it to fire into the ceiling instead of the room. Every move was efficient, silent, deadly. The outpost shook again as enemy forces breached the outer walls. Now 3 factions were fighting at once: the original garrison, the attackers, and the sudden uprising inside. Smoke filled the air. The human moved back toward her. "Can you run?" he asked. "Yes," she said automatically. Then, "Stay close. I do not take orders from—" A blast struck the wall behind her, sending debris flying. The human grabbed her arm and pulled her down just as the spot where she had been standing vanished in fire. She did not protest again. They moved through narrow corridors lit by emergency lights. The human seemed to know where to go without maps or guidance. He avoided open spaces, chose routes with multiple exits, and listened before every turn. "How do you know this place?" she asked between breaths. "I don't," he said, "but it was built by people who think the same way." "Who?" "Anyone who believes technology replaces thinking." They reached a maintenance tunnel leading toward the outer edge of the outpost. Behind them, alarms and weapons fire grew louder. Ahead, the tunnel sloped downward into darkness. As they ran, the princess realized something unsettling. The human was not escaping. He was hunting. He slowed only to sabotage power lines, seal doors behind them, and trigger chain reactions that collapsed entire sections of the outpost. Enemy soldiers pursuing them vanished in flashes of fire and falling metal. Finally, they emerged into the open air. The sky burned brighter now, lit by ships crashing and weapons tearing through the clouds. The ground shook constantly. The battle for the planet had reached its peak. The human stopped near a pile of wreckage and turned to her. "This is where we separate," he said. "What?" She stared at him. "You cannot survive alone out there." He gave a small, almost tired smile. "You said that already." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been growing in her mind since the holding area. "What are you?" He looked back toward the battlefield, where entire sections of the outpost collapsed under his earlier actions. "Human," he said simply. "And this is what happens when you trap us?" Without waiting for a response, he disappeared into the smoke and fire, moving toward the heart of the battle instead of away from it. The princess stood there, staring after him, her earlier words echoing in her mind. "You won't survive." For the first time, she wondered if she had spoken to death itself, and failed to recognize it. The ground outside the ruined outpost shook like a living creature trying to break free. Fire rose from the collapsed walls, painting the air with orange and red light. Smoke curled upward and mixed with the thick ash clouds above. The night sky looked like a storm of burning dust, rather than darkness. The princess stood near the broken entrance, breathing hard. She had survived battles before, but never anything as chaotic as this. Inside the outpost, 3 different armies were still fighting. Outside, the remains of the planet roared with explosions and falling debris. And somewhere in all that chaos, the human had vanished into the smoke. For a moment she considered running after him. She pushed that thought away. She was a princess, trained to command armies. She did not chase unknown soldiers, especially humans. Small, fragile creatures who survived only by luck. At least that was what she believed before meeting him. She looked at the direction he had gone. She could still hear faint blasts deeper in the ruins. But they weren't random. They came in patterns. 1 sharp hit, then silence, then 2 more like precise notes in a hidden rhythm. The princess felt something she was not used to feeling. Curiosity. She turned away and started toward the safer side of the battlefield, where her remaining soldiers might be regrouping. But she had taken only 3 steps before another explosion shook the ground behind her. This one was louder. Closer. Too close. She spun around. Out of the smoke came alien attackers. Tall, armored and carrying energy rifles glowing with bright blue light. Their weapons hummed in the air, aimed directly at her. There were 6 of them. Her heart tightened. She could not fight them like this. She had no armor, no weapon, and her energy reserves from her natural abilities were nearly empty. She backed up slowly, keeping her hands raised. One of the aliens stepped forward. "Valari, princess," he said, voice cold through his helmet. "You are worth far more alive than dead. But if you resist, we can change that." She clenched her teeth. "I am unarmed. I am not resisting." "Good," he said. "Move." His sentence ended suddenly. A shadow dropped from above with a silent, controlled fall. It landed behind the last alien in the group. None of them noticed at first. The princess did. Her breath caught. It was the human. Before she could speak, he moved. He grabbed the alien's weapon, twisted sharply, and used the alien's own armor to break the rifle in half. Then he pushed the alien sideways into another, creating a tangle of limbs and confused shouting. The other attackers turned around instantly, but too late. The human was already gone, rolled behind a broken metal beam, vanished into dust and falling sparks. A second later, he reappeared from another angle, hitting the ground low and sweeping a soldier off his feet. The princess stared, frozen. This was not the desperate fighting of a man trying to survive. This was controlled, calculated movement. Every step had purpose. Every strike was aimed at a weak point. Every dodge was measured. The soldiers struggled to track him. Their armor was powerful but heavy. Their weapons were strong but slow. The human moved like he learned long ago never to trust anything except his own body and mind. Within 10 seconds, 3 attackers were down. The remaining 3 tried to regroup, aiming their rifles carefully this time. They formed a tight circle, backs together, weapons pointing in all directions. The princess nodded slightly. "Smart," she muttered to herself. "You cannot surprise them now." But the human did not look surprised. He picked up a piece of broken metal, a small, sharp corner of a destroyed panel, and threw it with all his strength. It hit a half-damaged energy generator nearby. The machine sparked violently, then flared with a sudden flash of blinding light. The soldiers flinched. The human did not waste the moment. He darted forward and grabbed the first rifle before its owner recovered. With a smooth motion, he swung the weapon like a staff, knocking all 3 soldiers backward. The fight ended in seconds. Silence filled the burning air. The princess exhaled slowly. She didn't realize she had been holding her breath. The human walked toward her, brushing ash from his hands. His clothes were torn, his face smudged with dust, but his eyes were focused, sharp, and calm. "You followed me?" he said simply. "No," she replied quickly. "I was trying to reach my soldiers." He glanced at the bodies around them. "They weren't your soldiers." "Yes," she admitted. "But you should not have done that. You put yourself at risk for nothing." He shrugged. "You're not nothing." Her eyes widened. "You do not even know who I am." "I know enough," he said. "I know you aren't the kind who kills prisoners. That's rare." She stared at him, unsure whether to feel offended or impressed. "And what kind are you?" The human looked toward the deeper ruins again. There was a distant rumble, followed by a sudden flash of blue light, a ship exploding in the sky. "A survivor," he said. She felt a chill move through her, not because of his words, because of how he said them. Quiet, sure, final. As if surviving was not something he tried to do, as if it was something he always did. "Come with me," he said. She blinked. "Where?" "Not away from the battle. Through it." Her eyes widened. "That is madness. Why would we go deeper?" He pointed at the burning sky. "The attackers are landing more troops. They're sweeping outward from the center. Anyone running away will run straight into them." She looked behind her. Smoke covered everything. Dark shapes moved through the clouds, dropping from low-flying ships. He was right. "If we go back inside," he said, "we could move through the shadows and debris. The fight covers our tracks. And then what? Escape to the far side of the ruins?" "No." His voice hardened slightly. "We take the control tower." "That tower is in the middle of the battlefield," she said. "It is swarming with soldiers." "Yes," he said, "which means it won't be monitored." She blinked. "That makes no sense. To you," he said calmly, "but to them? They depend on automated surveillance. Every soldier assumes the machines are watching the tower. None of them will check it themselves." She stared at him. "You know they're thinking better than they do." He nodded. "People who trust machines always forget one thing." "What?" "Machines don't care if you trick them." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she followed him. The path through the ruins was worse than anything she had imagined. Walls fell around them. Fire roared from broken pipes. Alien soldiers from 2 armies fought in narrow corridors. And through all of it, the human moved like water flowing. Quiet, shifting direction, without warning. She noticed something else too. He observed everything. He watched the angle of a broken support beam. He studied how the smoke moved when wind passed through a crack. He memorized patrol routes within seconds. He predicted when an explosion would happen by the sound of energy building in a damaged core. He walked like someone who had survived too many traps to ever trust the ground beneath his feet. Once, they paused in a dark hallway, where sparks fell like orange rain. She leaned against a wall, trying to catch her breath. "You cannot keep pushing like this," she said. "You are injured." He checked his arm, where dried blood had cracked. "It's fine. It is not fine." Blood loss slows humans significantly. He tied a piece of cloth tighter and nodded. "Not today." She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. He wasn't ignoring pain. He was choosing to walk through it. They continued. They reached a collapsed section of the outpost where enemy soldiers were searching for survivors. The human placed a hand lightly on the princess's arm, stopping her. "Stay low," he said. He didn't wait for a reply. He slid forward silently. He did not attack. Instead, he used the broken metal beams and rubble to hide, moving from cover to cover with absolute precision. He reached a control panel, dead from overload. Still, he examined it, then pried off a small power core. "What is that?" she whispered. "A distraction." He rolled the core across the rubble. It hit a metal plate, sparked, and burst into a bright flash. The soldiers rushed toward it, and the two of them slipped past, unnoticed. "You are too calm," she said quietly as they moved deeper. "You are too loud," he replied. She blinked in surprise. "I am not loud. You talk in your head," he said. "Your breathing changes. You tense before turning a corner. Anyone trained to listen will hear it." She glared. "You should not be able to notice that." He shrugged. "I notice everything." She looked at him again. Really looked. He was not tall, not huge, not covered in armor. He carried no advanced weapon. He moved like someone used to being alone, used to using only his mind and his body to stay alive. And every time danger appeared, he reacted before she even understood what was happening. "You said humans survive because of instinct," she asked quietly. "No," he said without hesitation. "Not instinct. Then what?" "Because we don't wait for someone to save us." Before she could reply, the ground shook violently. The control tower, tall, metallic, smashed in several places, but still standing, rose ahead of them like a dark giant. "We're close," he said. She scanned the area. "I see no guards." "Exactly. How do we get inside?" He pointed. "Through the maintenance shaft on the east side." "And if it is sealed?" He gave her a small, tired smile. "Then we open it." They reached the tower moments later, slipping through shadows as enemy ships circled above. The maintenance shaft was blocked by a heavy metal cover. She sighed. "It is locked," she said. "We will need tools." The human crouched beside it, placed his hands on two key points of the frame, and pushed with all his strength. The metal bent, groaning under the pressure. One more push, and it broke free. The princess stared. "You should not be strong enough to do that." He wiped dust off his hands. "You should stop assuming what I can't do." She didn't argue. They climbed into the dark shaft, moving deeper toward the heart of the tower. Sparks lit their path. Distant explosions shook the metal around them. For the first time, the princess felt something new. Not fear, not shock, but trust. Not because he was human, but because he moved like someone who refused to die. As they reached the inner chamber of the tower, she looked at him and whispered, "Whoever fears you is right to fear you." He didn't answer. He was already moving toward the control core, ready to change the entire battle. The inside of the control tower was darker than the ruins outside. Emergency lights flickered weakly along the walls, casting long, broken shadows. Thick cables ran along the floor and ceiling like veins, humming softly with unstable energy. The air smelled sharp, filled with heat and metal. The princess followed the human closely as they moved through the narrow inner passage. Every step echoed softly, and she found herself holding her breath without realizing it. The tower felt different from the rest of the battlefield. Outside, war was loud and wild. Inside here, it felt quiet, tense, as if the structure itself was waiting. The humans stopped suddenly and raised one hand. She froze instantly. He tilted his head, listening. Footsteps, heavy, multiple. 3, he whispered. No, 4. She could not hear anything, but she trusted him now. Slowly, carefully, she moved closer to the wall, trying to copy the way he placed his feet. "Elite guards," she whispered. My empire uses units like this for command towers. He nodded once. Good, then they'll expect trouble from outside, not inside. She frowned. What does that mean? Before he answered, a group of armored soldiers appeared at the far end of the corridor. Their armor was thicker than standard troops, their weapons heavier. Their movements were disciplined, controlled. The human moved before they noticed. He pulled the princess behind a large power conduit and pressed her low. Then he reached into a broken panel nearby and tore out a handful of thin wires. What are you? He pressed a finger to his lips. The guards moved closer, scanning the hallway with bright beams of light. Their visors glowed faintly as their sensors searched for heat and movement. The human twisted the wires together, creating a small, unstable spark. He tossed it gently down the corridor, far from their hiding place. The spark landed, hissed, and then burst into a brief flash of light and sound. "Contact!" one of the guards shouted. They rushed toward the disturbance. The human did not follow. Instead, he moved in the opposite direction, pulling the princess with him. They slipped through a side passage just as the guards passed by, completely focused on the false threat. Her heart pounded hard in her chest. "You tricked their sensors," she whispered. "I tricked their habits," he replied quietly. "Sensors only confirm what people already expect." They moved deeper into the tower. The structure groaned occasionally, reacting to the distant impacts outside. Somewhere above them, heavy machinery powered the tower's main systems. They reached a wide chamber filled with control consoles, broken screens, and dangling cables. At the center stood the control core, a tall, cylindrical device glowing faintly blue. Cracks ran along its surface, but it was still active. The princess's breath caught. "With this," she said softly, "you could redirect communications across the entire battlefield. You could blind fleets. Shut down weapon grids." "Yes," he said, "or make them see the truth." She turned to him. "What truth?" Before he could answer, the tower shook violently. A deep alarm began to pulse through the chamber. "They know we're here," she said. "Of course they do," he replied. "That was always part of it." She stared at him. "You planned for this?" "I planned for resistance," he said. "They always resist." Heavy boots, metal scraping against metal. The princess moved closer to the control core. "If they breach this room, we are trapped." The human scanned the chamber quickly. "Not trapped. Pressured." "That is the same thing," she snapped. "No," he said calmly. "Pressure makes mistakes." The first wave of guards entered from the far corridor, weapons raised. Their armor bore the markings of several allied factions, proof that multiple empires had temporarily joined forces. "Human," one of them called out. "Step away from the core. You are surrounded." The human stepped forward instead. The princess felt her breath catch again. He was walking into open space, completely exposed. "You don't want to do this," the guard continued. "You cannot win." The human stopped a few steps away from them. "You're right," he said. "I can't win." The guards hesitated. "But you can lose," he continued, "and so can everyone else." Before they could respond, he grabbed a loose cable from the floor and slammed it into an open socket on the control core. The tower screamed. Lights flared across the chamber. Screens flickered to life, showing images from across the battlefield, ships firing blindly, units retreating, commanders shouting conflicting orders. "What did you do?" the princess shouted over the noise. "I opened every channel," he said. Military, civilian, political. The guards opened fire. Energy blasts tore through the air. The human dove aside, rolling behind a console. The princess dropped to the ground as sparks and debris exploded around her. The chamber became chaos. The human moved fast, using overturned consoles as cover. He fired only when he had to, disabling weapons rather than killing when possible. He kicked a fallen guard's rifle away and slammed the butt of his own weapon into another's helmet, sending the alien crashing into the wall. The princess crawled toward the control core, shielding her head as pieces of the ceiling fell. She could hear voices now, thousands of them, broadcast across the system. Commanders arguing, politicians panicking, civilians screaming in fear as they realized their leaders had lied to them. The human slid beside her. "Can you access it?" he asked. "Yes," she said, placing her hands on the core. "But once I do, there is no going back." He met her eyes. "Good." She hesitated only a second. Then she connected herself to the system. Information flooded her mind. Orders, reports, secret transmissions. She gasped as she saw the full picture. Hidden alliances, manufactured conflicts, entire planets sacrificed to maintain power. Her voice shook. They knew. All of them knew. "I know," the human said quietly. "That's why we're here." The guards regrouped and advanced again, firing in controlled bursts. The human pushed the princess aside and took a blast across the shoulder. He grunted but stayed standing. "You're hurt," she shouted. "I was hurt before," he replied. "It's just caught up." He threw a small device he had taken earlier into the air. It burst into thick smoke, filling the chamber. The guard sensors struggled, their targeting systems failing. The human used the confusion perfectly. He moved through the smoke like a shadow, striking quickly, disabling opponents before they understood where he was. Armor meant nothing when he attacked joints, cables, and exposed power cells. One by one, the guards fell back. Finally, silence returned to the chamber, broken only by the crackle of damaged systems. The human leaned against a console, breathing heavily. "You should leave," he said. The princess turned sharply. "I will not." "You have to," he insisted. "Once this spreads, every empire will want control of this tower. They'll come in force." "And you?" she asked. "I'll slow them down." She stared at him. "You will die." He looked at her calmly. "Maybe." She felt something twist painfully in her chest. Why do this? Why risk everything for a galaxy that treats your kind like tools? He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Because someone has to remind them that humans are not tools and not monsters, just people who don't like cages." The tower shook again, harder than before. Explosions echoed from below. "They're coming," she said urgently. He nodded. "Good." He turned back to the control core and adjusted a final setting. Across the system, broadcast sharpened. Images of war crimes, secret orders, and executions filled every channel. The truth could not be hidden now. The princess looked at the human. Really looked at him. Not as a weak species. Not as a soldier. But as something far more dangerous. A choice. "You were wrong," she said softly. "About what?" "When you said you were just a survivor." He glanced at her. "You are something else." He gave a tired smile. "Survivors always are." The tower doors below exploded inward. Heavy footsteps thundered up the corridors. The human stepped between the princess and the incoming threat. "Go," he said. "Use the shaft. It'll stay open for 2 minutes." She hesitated, then bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect rarely given. "I will remember this," she said. "So will they," he replied, nodding toward the glowing screens. She ran. As she disappeared into the shaft, the human turned back toward the smoke-filled entrance, raising his weapon calmly as enemy forces poured in. He stood alone in the heart of the tower, surrounded by lies burning away under the light of truth. And for the first time, The galaxy began to understand what the alien princess had not seen at the start. The human was not trying to survive. He was deciding how the war would end. The maintenance shaft shook violently as the princess climbed down. Metal screamed above her, and heat rushed through the narrow space. She did not look back. She forced herself to move, even as every instinct told her to return to the control chamber. Behind her, the tower roared with battle. She emerged from the shaft into a lower service corridor filled with smoke and flickering lights. The sounds of fighting were everywhere: energy weapons, collapsing walls, distant explosions. The truth was spreading across the galaxy now, carried by every open channel the human had unlocked. There was no stopping it. The princess pressed a hand against the wall to steady herself. Her breathing was uneven, not from fear, from anger. Not at the enemy, at herself. She had believed humans were weak, short-lived, simple. She had believed power came from fleets, bloodlines, and technology. And now a single human had torn the mask off the galaxy. She straightened and moved forward. Outside the tower, the battlefield had changed. Soldiers were no longer moving with confidence. Units stopped mid-advance as orders contradicted each other. Some weapons went silent. Ships hesitated in the sky, unsure who was now the enemy. The princess activated a damaged communicator she had taken from a fallen soldier. "This is Princess Sayalvira of the Valari Empire," she said clearly. "All Valari units disengage hostile operations and hold position." There was a pause, then confused voices answered her call. "Princess, the channels, everything is compromised." "I know," she said. "That is why you will listen to me. Do not fire unless fired upon. Protect civilians. Fall back from shared fronts." "By whose authority?" She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. "By mine." Across the battlefield, Valari units began to withdraw. Other factions noticed. Some followed. Others panicked, believing betrayal had begun. The fragile balance of power cracked. Inside the control tower, the human stood his ground. The chamber was barely recognizable now. Consoles lay shattered. Fires burned along the walls. Smoke filled the air so thick that even enhanced vision struggled to see through it. Enemy soldiers poured in wave after wave. The human moved with steady precision. He was bleeding now, his movements slower, but his mind remained sharp. He used the environment, collapsing sections of the ceiling, sealing doors, and forcing attackers into narrow paths where numbers meant nothing. He did not shout. He did not rage. He fought like someone finishing a task. Each minute he held them mattered. Each second allowed the truth to spread further. Outside the tower, fleets began to break formation. Civilian ships fled war zones. Some military commanders ordered retreats, unwilling to fight for leaders now exposed as liars. Others doubled down. A heavy assault unit approached the tower, weapons charging. The princess saw it from behind cover and felt her chest tighten. They were going to destroy the tower. She ran. She ran toward the control tower, ignoring shouted warnings from her soldiers. Debris fell around her as the assault unit fired, blasting chunks of metal from the structure. Inside, the human felt the shift before he heard it. The tower's supports screamed under massive impact. He looked up as the ceiling cracked. "So that's it," he muttered. He turned toward the control core one last time and adjusted the output manually, pushing power far beyond safe limits. Across the galaxy, the broadcast sharpened again. Hidden files unlocked. Names were revealed. Orders replayed. Entire histories rewritten in real time. The galaxy watched. The assault unit fired again. The tower began to collapse. The princess reached the base of the structure just as the upper levels gave way. A shockwave threw her backward. She hit the ground hard, gasping for breath as dust and fire swallowed the sky. "No," she whispered. For a long moment, she could not see anything. Then something moved through the smoke. A figure stumbled out of the falling debris, human, alive. She pushed herself up and ran to him, catching him as his legs gave out. His weight nearly crushed her, but she held on, refusing to let go. "You idiot," she said, her voice shaking. "You were supposed to stay inside." He coughed weakly. Plan changed. Behind them, the control tower collapsed completely, crashing into itself with a sound like the end of a world. The battle around them slowed. Soldiers stared. Ships hovered uncertainly. The tower was gone, but the truth was already everywhere. Valari soldiers formed a protective circle around the princess and the human. Other factions hesitated, weapons lowered. No one wanted to be the one who killed the witness of everything now revealed. The princess looked down at the human's face. He was pale, blood drying along his temple and arm. His eyes fluttered, but he was still conscious. "Why?" she demanded quietly. "Why stay until the end?" He smiled faintly. "Because if I ran, they'd call it propaganda." She clenched her jaw. "You are impossible, I've been told." Medical units rushed forward cautiously. The princess waved them in. "Treat him first," she ordered. One of the medics hesitated. "Princess, he is human. His biology. Treat him," she repeated, her voice cold and final. They obeyed. As the human was lifted onto a stretcher, he caught her wrist weakly. "Did it work?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, it worked." He closed his eyes with a tired breath. The war did not end that day, but it changed. Across the galaxy, alliances shattered, governments fell, trials were demanded. Worlds that had been silent for generations began to speak, and one truth echoed louder than all others. A single human, with no fleet and no crown, had forced the galaxy to look at itself. Days later, the princess stood aboard a Valari medical vessel. The human lay unconscious nearby, surrounded by unfamiliar machines adjusted carefully to keep him alive. She watched the steady rise and fall of his chest. "You were wrong," she said softly, though he could not hear her. "You were not death." She paused, then corrected herself. "You were something worse for them." Outside the viewport, stars stretched endlessly. Somewhere among them, empires were trembling, rewriting laws, preparing for a future they could no longer control. The princess turned away from the window and made a decision. When the human woke, the galaxy would already be different, and she would make sure it stayed that way.